Galactic Council chamber stretched for nearly a kilometer, its crystalline walls reflecting the bioluminescent patterns of a dozen different species. Admiral Sarah stood at the center of the vast space, her simple black military uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the alien delegates surrounding her. The weight of their collective gaze pressed down on her shoulders, but her spine remained straight, her hands clasped behind her back in perfect military bearing. "Primitive," hissed General, his serpentine form coiled on the raised platform reserved for the delegation. His scales shifted from deep purple to angry crimson as he spoke. "The humans claim to possess military prowess worthy of council recognition, yet they send us this creature." The insult was deliberate and calculated. Sarah had been briefed on culture during the 3-month journey to the council. Among their species, referring to another sentient being as a creature was tantamount to declaring them barely evolved above animals. The translation matrix built into her earpiece made sure she understood every nuance of contempt in words. Chancellor of the Hegemony leaned forward on his 6 legs, his compound eyes gleaming with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement among his species. "Perhaps the humans are unaware of the standards required for council membership," he clicked, his mandibles working in the pattern that indicated condescension. "Military capability cannot be measured by the primitive kinetic weapons their species favors." Sarah remained silent, following the diplomatic protocols Earth's government had drilled into her. Let them talk. Let them reveal their assumptions and prejudices. Information was ammunition, and she was gathering plenty of both. The human delegation occupied the smallest platform in the chamber, barely large enough for Sarah and Ambassador Martinez. Earth had been granted this hearing after 3 years of persistent requests, but the Council had made it clear they considered it a formality. Humanity had nothing to offer the galactic community that couldn't be obtained more efficiently from established member species. "The human military structure is laughably inefficient," continued Admiral of the Dominion Fleet. His crystalline form pulsed with different colored lights as he spoke, each hue indicating emotional emphasis in ways that took the translation matrix several seconds to process. "Their soldiers require constant resupply of food and water, cannot function in most atmospheric conditions without cumbersome equipment, and their reflexes are so slow they would be eliminated before they could even aim their crude projectile weapons." The laughter that followed was universal across species lines. The hegemony's chittering joined the sibilant hissing and the Dominion's harmonic chiming. Even the usually stoic Confederation representatives allowed their telepathic amusement to ripple through the chamber's psionic dampeners. Ambassador Martinez shifted uncomfortably beside her, but Sarah didn't move. She had heard variations of these same arguments during every preliminary negotiation over the past 6 months. The galactic community had evolved beyond kinetic warfare centuries ago. Their conflicts were decided by energy weapons, autonomous drones, and strategic planetary bombardment. The idea that individual marksmanship could have any relevance in modern combat was, to them, hopelessly primitive. "Perhaps," said High Arbitrator Oss, his voice carrying the formal authority of his position as the Council's chief judge, "the humans would be willing to demonstrate these military capabilities they claim to possess." The chamber fell silent. This was not part of the scheduled proceedings, but the High Arbitrator's word carried enormous weight in Council deliberations. Sarah felt Ambassador Martinez tense beside her, but she kept her expression neutral. They had anticipated this possibility. "The hegemony maintains a training facility on this world," Chancellor offered helpfully. "It would be educational to observe human military doctrine in action against established galactic standards." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The training facility would be designed for alien physiology and weapons systems. Human equipment would be at a massive disadvantage, and any poor performance would be documented and broadcast across the galaxy as evidence of humanity's military inadequacy. "The Dominion would be honored to provide technical support for such a demonstration," Admiral added. "Our latest combat simulators could provide appropriate challenges for human capabilities." Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber without amplification. "The United Earth Defense Force accepts your generous offer." Ambassador Martinez barely suppressed a wince. They had discussed this scenario extensively during the journey, but actually agreeing to a rigged demonstration felt like signing humanity's death warrant. If Sarah failed, Earth would be Council membership, and relegated to the status of a protected primitive world, a galactic nature preserved with no voice in interstellar affairs. "Excellent," General said, his scales brightening with anticipation. "I propose a simple marksmanship trial. The human can attempt to demonstrate the effectiveness of their primitive kinetic weapons against targets appropriate to galactic military standards." The other delegates murmured agreement. Marksmanship trials were a common form of entertainment at council gatherings, usually involving junior officers from various species competing for honor and prizes. The targets would be small, fast-moving, and protected by energy shields that could deflect most forms of attack. "What parameters would be appropriate?" High Arbitrator Oss asked. "Standard Council specifications," Chancellor replied. 6 targets, each no larger than a human head, moving in randomized patterns at velocities up to 300 kilometers per hour. Energy shielding rated to deflect Class 4 plasma discharge. Range of 2 kilometers in variable atmospheric conditions. Sarah did quick mental calculations. The targets would be roughly the size of a softball, moving faster than a racing hover car, protected by shields that could stop concentrated energy weapons, and positioned at a range that would test the limits of even her best rifle. Under normal circumstances, even an expert marksman would be lucky to hit 1 target out of 6. "And what weapons would be permitted for this demonstration?" she asked. Admiral's crystalline form pulsed with what Sarah now recognized as malicious amusement. "Any weapon system of human manufacture, naturally. We would not want to give the humans any unfair advantage by forcing them to use superior galactic technology." The insult was clear, but so was the opportunity. They expected her to fail using human weapons, which meant they had designed the trial around the assumption that kinetic projectiles were ineffective against their defenses. "1 shot per target?" Sarah asked. "Of course," General replied. "We would not want to waste more time than necessary on this demonstration." Sarah nodded slowly. "When would be convenient for the Council?" "The facility is available immediately," Chancellor said, "unless the human requires time to prepare." The challenge was unmistakable. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and psychic emanations of dozens of species that considered humanity beneath their notice. She thought about the 3 billion people on Earth who were depending on this moment, about the colonies struggling to expand beyond the solar system without access to galactic trade routes and technology. "I'm ready now," she said. The transport to the training facility took only minutes, but the journey felt like hours. Sarah sat in the observation cabin of the Hegemony shuttle, watching the alien cityscape pass below through the transparent aluminum viewport. The architecture was unlike anything on Earth, organic curves that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it, structures that phased in and out of visible spectrum wavelengths, transportation networks that moved through dimensions she couldn't perceive. Ambassador Martinez sat across from her, his face pale with worry. "Sarah, are you absolutely certain about this? The political ramifications if you fail." "I won't fail," she replied quietly. "But the parameters they've set are impossible. No human sniper has ever attempted anything like this." Sarah opened the equipment case that had traveled with them from Earth. Inside, secured in custom-fitted foam, lay her rifle. It was a thing of beauty, a custom-built precision instrument that represented the pinnacle of human engineering. The carbon fiber stock was perfectly balanced, the titanium barrel threaded with microscopic precision, the scope calibrated to her exact specifications after years of fine-tuning. "They think our weapons are primitive," she said, running her fingers along the rifle's familiar lines. "They're not wrong exactly. This fires a simple metal projectile using chemical propellant. No energy shielding, no exotic matter, no quantum manipulation." "Then how?" "Because they've never faced anything like it before." Sarah looked up from the rifle, meeting Martinez's worried gaze. "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons, plasma bolts, particle beams, focused radiation. They work by dispersing or deflecting energy over a wide area." Martinez frowned, but kinetic energy is still energy. "Yes, but delivered differently." Sarah began assembling the rifle with practiced efficiency. "Energy weapons spread their force over time and distance. A plasma bolt might deliver massive amounts of energy, but that energy arrives gradually as the bolt travels and impacts. Shields can bleed off that energy or redirect it." "And a bullet?" A bullet delivers all its kinetic energy in one instant, concentrated into an incredibly small area. The shields aren't designed for that kind of impact. Sarah slid the bolt into place with a satisfying click. It's like the difference between being hit by a fire hose and being stabbed with an ice pick. The shuttle touched down at the training facility, and Sarah felt the change in gravity immediately. This world had roughly 1.2 times Earth's gravitational pull, which would affect bullet trajectory, but not enough to matter at the ranges they were discussing. The atmosphere was slightly denser than Earth normal, with a different gas mixture that would create minimal drift, actually advantageous for long-range shooting. The facility itself was impressive. A vast complex of buildings that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves as needed, surrounded by training ranges that could simulate virtually any combat environment in the galaxy. The marksmanship range where the demonstration would take place stretched across several kilometers of artificially generated terrain. General met them at the facility entrance, his serpentine form moving with predatory grace. "Welcome to the Hegemony Advanced Combat Training Center," he said, making no effort to hide his anticipation. "I trust you will find our facilities educational." "I'm sure I will," Sarah replied. The gallery overlooking the range was already filled with spectators. Word of the demonstration had spread quickly, and representatives from every major galactic power had arrived to witness humanity's humiliation firsthand. Sarah could see recording devices of various alien designs, capturing every moment for later broadcast across the galaxy. High Arbitrator Oz stood at the center of the gallery, his official robes marking him as the neutral observer who would judge the demonstration's results. "The parameters have been set according to galactic military standards," he announced. 6 targets, each measuring precisely 15 centimeters in diameter, will move in unpredictable patterns at velocities ranging from 200 to 300 kilometers per hour. Each target will be protected by standard Council-grade energy shielding. The range is 2.1 kilometers, with variable wind conditions and atmospheric distortion fields active. Sarah nodded and moved to the firing position. The range stretched out before her, a landscape of rolling hills and scattered obstacles that had been designed to challenge even the most advanced targeting systems. Somewhere out there, 6 small targets were waiting to begin their high-speed dance. She set up her rifle on the provided shooting rest, a device clearly designed for alien physiology but adaptable enough to serve her needs. The scope was a masterpiece of human optical engineering, variable magnification from 4x to 25x, with built-in and ballistic compensation. She had zeroed it perfectly during the journey, spending hours in the ship's cargo hold with a laser rangefinder and calculated trajectories. "The targets will become active in 30 seconds, announced the range control system in a synthesized voice that managed to sound condescending even through the translation matrix. "Scoring will be determined by direct impact with the target core. Partial hits or impacts on shielding will not be counted." Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate and clearing her mind of everything except the task ahead. This was what she had trained for her entire adult life, not just marksmanship, but the ability to perform under impossible pressure when everything depended on perfect execution. The range fell silent except for the low hum of alien technology and the whisper of artificial wind across the terrain. Sarah swept the scope across the range, memorizing landmarks and calculating approximate distances to various points where targets might appear. "Targets active," the control system announced. Sarah saw them immediately, 6 small objects launching from hidden positions across the range, beginning their erratic dance through the air. Her scope tracked the nearest one, a metallic sphere about the size of a baseball moving at roughly 250 kilometers per hour in a zigzag pattern that would challenge the best computer-controlled tracking systems. The first shot was crucial, not just for the practical purpose of eliminating a target, but for the psychological impact on the watching aliens. They needed to see that human weapons weren't primitive relics, but precision instruments in the right hands. Sarah led the target, calculating its trajectory and the complex factors that would affect her bullet's flight path. Wind speed and direction, atmospheric density, gravitational drop, the effect of the planet's rotation, dozens of variables that had to be processed and compensated for in the space of heartbeats. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range, followed immediately by the distinctive sound of energy shielding overloading and a target exploding into fragments. The first target was down, eliminated so quickly that several aliens in the gallery didn't immediately understand what had happened. Sarah was already tracking the second target before the first one finished falling. This one was moving faster, nearly 300 kilometers per hour, and following a more complex pattern that included sudden altitude changes and direction reversals. She had perhaps 8 seconds before it moved out of effective range. The scope followed the target's weaving path, Sarah's mind processing the mathematics of interception with unconscious precision. Lead the target, account for bullet drop, compensate for wind drift, and always remember that the target could change direction at any moment. The second shot rang out, followed by another overloading energy shield and another destroyed target. The gallery had fallen completely silent now. General scales had shifted to a muddy brown color that Sarah's briefings had identified as confusion and concern. Chancellor's compound eyes were focused entirely on her position, his mandibles working in patterns that indicated intense concentration. Target 3 was the most challenging yet, smaller than the others, and moving in a complex three-dimensional spiral that would have been impossible to track without the sophisticated targeting computers that galactic military forces took for granted. Sarah didn't have targeting computers. She had 20 years of experience, perfect equipment, and absolute confidence in her abilities. She waited for the target to enter the optimal engagement zone, leading it by what felt like an impossible amount, and fired. The third target disintegrated in a shower of sparks and shattered shielding components. 4 targets remained, but they had begun to adapt to her attacks. The range's control system was learning from her success, making the remaining targets faster and more unpredictable. Target 4 appeared to be oscillating through multiple dimensions, phasing in and out of visible reality in a pattern that would confuse most optical targeting systems. Sarah adjusted her scope settings, switching to infrared and electromagnetic spectrum analysis. The target might be phasing through dimensions, but it was still generating heat and electromagnetic signatures. She tracked those signatures, predicted where the target would be when it phased back into normal space, and fired. Target 4 exploded just as it materialized, showering the landscape with debris from both the target and its overloaded shielding system. The silence in the gallery was now absolute. Sarah could feel the weight of hundreds of alien minds trying to process what they were witnessing. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Human weapons were primitive. Human reflexes were slow. Human targeting capabilities were laughably inferior to galactic standards. Target 5 was moving faster than anything Sarah had ever engaged, nearly 400 kilometers per hour in a pattern that seemed to violate several laws of physics. It was also the smallest yet, barely larger than a tennis ball, and its shielding was more powerful than the previous targets. Sarah took a deep breath and emptied her mind of everything except the shot. Distance, wind, target movement, gravitational effects, all the variables aligned in her consciousness like pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. She had one chance to hit a target moving faster than most aircraft, at a range where most people couldn't reliably hit a stationary barn. The rifle cracked, the target exploded. One target remained. Target 6 wasn't moving at all. It hung motionless in the air at maximum range, protected by shielding so powerful that energy discharges from its surface were visible even through the scope. The message was clear. The range control system had given up on evasion and simply maximized defensive power. If she could punch through that level of shielding with a primitive kinetic weapon, then every assumption the galactic community had made about human military capability would be proven wrong. Sarah studied the target through her scope, noting the patterns of energy discharge that indicated shield strength and configuration. The barrier was designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons, spreading incoming force across its entire surface. But she wasn't firing an energy weapon. She was firing a piece of tungsten core steel moving at nearly a kilometer per second, delivering all its kinetic energy to a target area smaller than a coin. Sarah made minute adjustments to her scope, compensating for the increased atmospheric distortion at maximum range. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, and became one with the rifle that had been her constant companion for half a decade. The 6th shot echoed across the range like thunder. For a moment, nothing happened. The target hung in the air, its shields blazing with energy as they absorbed and tried to deflect the incoming projectile. Then, suddenly, the barrier collapsed. The overloaded shield generators exploded in a cascade of sparks and plasma discharge, and the target itself disintegrated under the impact of a simple piece of metal moving very, very fast. Sarah set down her rifle and stood, turning to face the gallery full of silent aliens. 6 targets, 6 shots, perfect score. General was the first to find his voice. "Impossible," he hissed, his scales cycling through colors that indicated confusion, anger, and what might have been fear. "The shielding specifications, no kinetic weapon should have been able." 6 for 6, High Arbitrator Oss announced, his voice carrying clearly across the range. "Perfect accuracy under galactic military standards." The implications hung in the air like smoke from the rifle barrel. If one human soldier could achieve these results with primitive weapons, what could a properly equipped human military force accomplish? How many assumptions about galactic military doctrine would need to be reconsidered? Chancellor stepped forward, his compound eyes fixed on Sarah. "This demonstration proves nothing," he clicked rapidly. "One individual's performance cannot be extrapolated to an entire species' military capability." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the council chamber. "Would you like to see our military standards for sniper qualification?" She pulled out a data pad and displayed the scoring requirements for graduation from the United Earth Defense Force Sniper School. The minimum passing score was 6 targets out of 10 at ranges exceeding 3 kilometers, under adverse conditions, with less than optimal equipment. "This would be considered barely adequate performance by our training standards," she continued calmly. "We have approximately 12,000 qualified snipers currently in active service, with several thousand more in reserve status." The numbers sank in slowly. 12,000 individuals capable of performance that exceeded anything the galactic community considered possible. Thousands more in reserve, ready for activation. And these were just the snipers, specialized troops representing a tiny fraction of humanity's total military capacity. Admiral's crystalline form pulsed through a rapid sequence of colors as he processed the implications. "If your species possesses such capabilities, why has Earth not applied for military alliance status with any of the major powers?" "Because we were waiting for an invitation to join the Council," Ambassador Martinez said, speaking for the first time since the demonstration began. "Humanity prefers diplomacy to conflict when possible." "But if conflict becomes necessary," Sarah added, checking her rifle and preparing to pack it away, "we're prepared for that too." The gallery erupted into discussion as delegates from different species huddled together, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and psychic emanations. Sarah could see the rapid exchange of information as the implications of what they had witnessed spread through the galactic community's communication networks. High Arbitrator Oss raised his hand for silence, and the discussions gradually subsided. "The demonstration has been completed according to galactic military standards," he announced formally. "The results will be entered into the official record and distributed to all council members for consideration during humanity's membership evaluation." Sarah nodded politely and finished packing her rifle. The case closed with a soft click that somehow seemed louder than the 6 shots that had just changed humanity's position in the galaxy. As they prepared to leave the range, General approached her position. His serpentine form moved with less confidence than it had shown earlier, and his scales had settled into a neutral gray that indicated uncertainty. "Human," he said quietly, "your species may be more interesting than we initially assessed." "We prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable," Sarah replied. "Indeed," paused, studying her with alien eyes that held new respect. "Perhaps there are aspects of warfare that the galactic community has forgotten in our advancement beyond kinetic weapons." "Perhaps," Sarah agreed. "We'd be happy to share our perspective if the Council is interested in learning." The journey back to the Council chamber was very different from the trip to the range. The same alien delegates who had dismissed humanity as primitive now watched Sarah with careful attention. Ambassador Martinez sat, his earlier worry replaced by cautious optimism. "Do you think it worked?" he asked quietly. Sarah looked out at the alien cityscape passing below, thinking about the 6 perfect shots that had taken less than 3 minutes to fire. "It worked," she said. The question now is what happens next. What do you mean? They underestimated us because they thought our weapons were primitive, Sarah explained. Now they know better. That makes us either a valuable ally or a significant threat, depending on how they choose to view the situation. Martinez frowned. You think they might see us as a threat? 12,000 snipers who can punch through galactic standard shielding with primitive weapons, Sarah said. How would you interpret that information if you were them? The question hung in the air as their shuttle approached the Council complex. Below them, the crystalline spires of galactic civilization reached toward the stars, monuments to technologies and achievements that humanity was only beginning to understand. But in her rifle case, Sarah carried proof that advancement and superiority weren't always the same thing. Sometimes the old ways worked best. As they disembarked at the Council complex, Sarah could see the change in how the alien guards and staff members regarded her. Word of the demonstration had spread quickly through the facility's communication networks. The human with the primitive weapon had achieved something that challenged fundamental assumptions about military capability and technological advancement. Ambassador Martinez straightened his diplomatic uniform and prepared to face whatever consequences their demonstration had unleashed. Ready for the next phase. Sarah shouldered her rifle case and walked toward the council chamber where Earth's future would be decided. I've been ready my whole life. The massive doors of the chamber opened before them, and they stepped into a room full of aliens who no longer saw humanity as a primitive curiosity to be dismissed. 6 shots had changed everything, and the galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they were properly motivated. The real test was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after Sarah's demonstration at the training facility. The chamber buzzed with tension as delegates from 47 different species gathered to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. Sarah sat in the human delegation area, her rifle case resting against her chair, while around her the most powerful beings in the galaxy debated humanity's fate. The demonstration was clearly rigged, insisted Admiral, his crystalline form pulsing angry red patterns. No primitive kinetic weapon could penetrate Council-grade shielding. The targets must have been configured with reduced defensive parameters. Chancellor's mandibles clicked in irritation. The hegemony does not rig demonstrations for the benefit of primitive species. Our facility's integrity is beyond question. Then explain how a chemical-propelled projectile breached energy barriers designed to stop Class 6 plasma artillery, General demanded. His scales had been cycling through agitated colors since the session began, unable to settle on a single hue. High Arbitrator Oss called for order, his ceremonial staff striking the resonance crystal that served as the chamber's focal point. The demonstration was conducted under standard protocols with independent verification. The results are not in question, only their interpretation. Sarah listened to the debate with growing understanding of the political forces at play. The major powers weren't just surprised by human military capability. They were actively frightened by its implications. For centuries, galactic warfare had followed predictable patterns based on technological advancement and resource allocation. The idea that a primitive species could develop effective countermeasures to advanced defensive systems threatened the entire foundation of galactic military doctrine. Ambassador Martinez leaned over to whisper in her ear. The Confederation delegation has requested a private meeting. They want to discuss potential alliance terms. Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the ongoing debate. The Confederation represented the most militaristic of the major powers, with territory spanning nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Their interest in humanity's military capabilities was both flattering and concerning. The question before this council, announced Counselor and of the Free Worlds Alliance, is whether humanity's demonstrated capabilities represent an anomaly or a systematic advantage that could disrupt galactic stability. The phrase, disrupt galactic stability, sent a chill through the chamber. In Council terminology, it was diplomatic language for pose a threat to established power structures. Sarah had spent enough time studying galactic politics to understand that species which disrupted stability often found themselves facing coordinated sanctions or, in extreme cases, preemptive military action. Perhaps we should consider the possibility, said Delegate Nth from the Neutral Zone Consortium. That humanity's capabilities could be beneficial to galactic security rather than threatening to it. How so? General challenged. The hegemony's latest intelligence reports indicate increasing activity in the void sectors, Nth continued. Unknown vessels using unidentified technology probing our outer territories. If these represent a genuine external threat, perhaps unconventional military capabilities would be advantageous. Sarah felt a sudden shift in the chamber's atmosphere. The void sectors were regions of space beyond the galaxy's edge, supposedly empty, except for ancient ruins and the occasional research expedition. If something was moving in that darkness, it represented a potential threat that could unite the normally fractious galactic powers. What kind of unknown vessels? Ambassador Martinez asked, speaking without formal permission but apparently drawing enough interest that no one objected. Chancellor's compound eyes focused on the human delegation. Ships that appear to phase in and out of normal space using technology we cannot identify. Their hull materials are unlike anything in our databases, and they seem immune to standard scanning techniques. Energy signatures? Sarah asked quietly. Minimal, Admiral replied, his antagonism temporarily set aside in favor of professional interest. They register as barely more than background radiation until they engage their propulsion systems. Sarah exchanged glances with Martinez. Ships designed to avoid detection by energy-based sensors would be perfectly visible to the kind of passive optical and electromagnetic tracking systems that human military forces still used. What the aliens saw as obsolete technology might be exactly what was needed to identify and track these mysterious intruders. How many incursions have been detected? Martinez pressed. 17 confirmed over the past 6 months, Counselor admitted. Each time our response fleets arrive to find empty space, the intruders vanish before we can engage them. Because they can detect your approach, Sarah said, her tactical mind already working through the implications. Energy-based sensors and communications work both ways. If they're monitoring your electromagnetic signatures, they know you're coming long before you arrive. The chamber fell silent as the aliens processed this observation. Their advanced technology, which they had always seen as an advantage, might actually be a liability when facing an enemy that could use those same energy signatures against them. High Arbitrator Oss leaned forward on his platform. Are you suggesting that human technology could detect these intruders where galactic systems have failed? Possibly, Sarah replied carefully. Passive sensors don't emit energy signatures that can be detected. Chemical-powered vessels don't generate the electromagnetic footprint that your ships produce. From a stealth perspective, our primitive technology might actually be more advanced than your energy-based systems. The implications of her words rippled through the chamber like shockwaves. The galactic community had built their entire military doctrine around overwhelming technological superiority. The possibility that lower-tech solutions might be more effective in certain situations challenged their fundamental assumptions about warfare and progress. This is speculation, General protested, but his scales had shifted to colors indicating uncertainty rather than anger. It's tactical analysis, Sarah corrected. My job is to assess threats and develop countermeasures. These unknown ships are using your own technological advantages against you. They're hiding in the gaps between your sensors and striking before your energy signatures can be traced back to their source. Chancellor's mandibles worked rapidly as he processed her assessment. If this analysis is correct, then traditional galactic military responses would be ineffective against these intruders. Worse than ineffective, Sarah continued. Your standard fleet deployments would be actively counterproductive. Large energy signatures from multiple vessels would be visible to these intruders across multiple star systems. You're essentially broadcasting your positions and intentions to an enemy that specializes in avoiding detection. The debate that followed was intense and wide-ranging. Military from every major power participated in discussions that ranged from theoretical tactical doctrine to detailed technical specifications. Sarah found herself at the center of conversations that would have been unimaginable just days earlier, as alien strategists sought her perspective on challenges they had never considered. What would you recommend for patrol doctrine in the void sectors? Asked Commander of the Dominion Navy, a question that would have been laughable coming from an officer whose fleet could sterilize entire planets. Sarah considered the question seriously. Small, widely dispersed vessels using passive sensors and chemical propulsion. No energy weapons or active scanning. Visual confirmation and kinetic projectiles for engagement. Think of it as a return to traditional patrol and interdiction tactics. Kinetic projectiles would be ineffective against shielded targets, Admiral pointed out. Only if the targets are using shields, Sarah replied. Stealth vessels typically minimize energy output, including defensive systems. If they're designed to avoid detection, they probably can't afford to maintain active energy barriers. The logic was sound, and several alien officers nodded in acknowledgement. Energy shields required massive power generation systems that produced detectable signatures. A truly stealthy vessel would have to choose between protection and concealment. How many ships would Earth be willing to commit to void sector patrols? Chancellor asked suddenly. The question caught both Sarah and Martinez off guard. It was a direct request for military cooperation, the kind of alliance offer that Earth had been seeking for years. That would depend on the specific mission parameters and support requirements, Martinez replied diplomatically. Earth would need to evaluate the strategic implications and resource commitments involved. What he means, Sarah added with a slight smile, is that we'd need to see the intelligence files and tactical assessments before committing to any specific deployment. General scales shifted to colors indicating amusement. A reasonable position. Perhaps humanity is more sophisticated than we initially assumed. The comment was clearly intended as a grudging compliment, but it highlighted the fundamental disconnect between galactic and human perspectives on military planning. The aliens were accustomed to deploying overwhelming force based on technological superiority. Humans had learned to succeed through careful preparation, tactical flexibility, and efficient use of limited resources. There is another consideration, Counselor said quietly. If these unknown vessels represent a genuine threat to galactic security, then humanity's membership in the Council becomes not just a political courtesy, but a strategic necessity. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber. Council membership would give Earth access to galactic technology, trade networks, and star charts covering millions of worlds. But it would also make humanity a target for whatever forces were moving in the void sectors. The Free Worlds Alliance would support immediate provisional membership for Earth, and continued, contingent on military cooperation agreements regarding void sector security. The Confederation concurs, added their military representative. Human tactical capabilities could provide significant advantages in unconventional warfare scenarios. Sarah watched the political maneuvering with professional interest. The aliens were offering Earth exactly what it wanted, full membership in the galactic community. But they were also making it clear that humanity would be expected to earn that membership by taking on military responsibilities that the established powers found challenging. What about our technological limitations? Martinez asked. Human vessels lack faster-than-light communication and advanced navigation systems. We couldn't coordinate with galactic fleets using standard protocols. Those limitations might actually be advantages, Admiral admitted reluctantly. If these intruders can intercept our communication networks, then vessels operating without FTL communications would be immune to that form of surveillance. Chancellor nodded agreement. Independent operation using preset mission parameters would eliminate the need for real-time coordination. Each human vessel would be effectively invisible to enemy intercepts. The conversation was moving beyond theoretical discussions toward practical planning. Sarah could see that the aliens were genuinely interested in human military cooperation, not just as a curiosity, but as a potentially vital resource in addressing a real security threat. There would need to be extensive training and equipment compatibility programs, she pointed out. Human crew members would require life support modifications for extended operations in alien environments. Our vessels would need upgraded sensors and navigation systems for deep space missions. The hegemony maintains advanced training facilities on 17 worlds, Chancellor offered. We would be willing to provide specialized instruction in galactic military protocols and xenobiology. The Dominion could supply technical upgrades for human vessels, Admiral added. Our engineering corps has extensive experience in cross-species technology integration. The offers were generous, almost too generous. Sarah recognized the signs of entities who were genuinely worried about a threat they couldn't handle with conventional means. The unknown vessels in the void sectors represented more than just a security concern. They were a direct challenge to galactic military supremacy. "What's the timeline on these void sector incursions?" she asked. General consulted a data crystal that materialized in front of his position. "The frequency is increasing. We detected the first incursion 8 months ago. The rate has accelerated to approximately 1 sighting every 10 days, with the most recent occurring just 6 days ago." "Are they getting closer to inhabited systems?" "Unknown. The void sectors span enormous distances, and our sensor coverage is limited in those regions. However, the fact that we're detecting them at all suggests they may be probing deeper into galactic territory." Sarah processed the information with growing concern. An unknown enemy using stealth technology, conducting reconnaissance missions of increasing frequency, and actively avoiding engagement with galactic forces. It was a textbook preparation for invasion, the kind of gradual escalation that preceded major military campaigns. "Has anyone attempted direct communication with these vessels?" Martinez asked. "All standard diplomatic protocols have been transmitted," Counselor replied. "No response has been received. They appear to be purely observational in nature." "Or they're gathering intelligence for future operations," Sarah said grimly. "The pattern suggests systematic reconnaissance rather than random exploration." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the unknown vessels were preparing for invasion, then the galactic community was facing its first major external threat in over 3 centuries. Their advanced technology, which had made internal conflicts largely obsolete, might be inadequate against an enemy that had specifically adapted to counter their advantages. High Arbitrator Oss stood, his ceremonial robes rustling with the formal weight of his office. "The Council recognizes that extraordinary circumstances may require extraordinary measures. If humanity is willing to commit military resources to addressing the void sector situation, then expedited membership proceedings would be appropriate." The offer was unprecedented. Species typically spent decades in provisional status before being considered for full membership. Earth was being offered immediate integration into galactic civilization in exchange for military cooperation against an unknown threat. "What specific commitments would be required?" Martinez asked carefully. "A joint task force," Chancellor replied. "Human vessels and crews working in coordination with galactic forces to establish effective patrol and interdiction capabilities in the void sectors. With human tactical doctrine and technology providing the foundation for engagement protocols," General added, his scales finally settling into colors indicating determination rather than uncertainty. Sarah looked around the chamber, seeing the faces and optical sensors and psychic emanations of dozens of species united by concern about a common threat. It was exactly the kind of situation that could forge lasting alliances or lead to catastrophic misunderstandings if not handled carefully. "We would need complete intelligence files on the incursions," she said finally. "Sensor recordings, trajectory analyses, anything that might help us understand what we're dealing with." "Granted," Admiral responded immediately. "And we would need guarantees regarding human autonomy in tactical decisions. Our crews would be operating under human command structure with human rules of engagement." "Acceptable," Chancellor agreed. "Finally, we would need assurances that this cooperation agreement doesn't compromise Earth's sovereignty or commit humanity to conflicts beyond the void sector situation." High Arbitrator Oss nodded slowly. "The Council recognizes human autonomy and territorial integrity. Military cooperation would be limited to the specific threat under discussion." Martinez looked at Sarah, seeking her professional assessment of the situation. She thought about the 12,000 qualified snipers back on Earth, the millions of military personnel who could be trained for space operations, and the industrial capacity that had rebuilt human civilization after the resource wars of the previous century. "Earth accepts the Council's offer," Martinez said formally. "We'll need 48 hours to consult with our government, but I'm authorized to indicate provisional agreement pending final approval." The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates began planning the integration of human forces into galactic military operations. Sarah sat back in her chair, thinking about how much had changed since her rifle had cracked 6 times at the training range. 6 shots had proven that humans could match galactic military standards. Now they would have the opportunity to prove that human tactical thinking could solve problems that advanced technology could not. As the session continued, Sarah found herself surrounded by alien officers asking detailed questions about human military doctrine, training procedures, and logistical capabilities. The same beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive just days earlier were now eager to learn from human experience and expertise. "How long does human sniper training typically take?" Commander inquired, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. 6 months for basic qualification, 2 years for advanced specialization, Sarah replied. "But we've been developing accelerated training programs that could adapt qualified personnel for space operations in much less time." "What about crew endurance for extended missions?" asked a hegemony tactical specialist. "Human physiology is actually well suited for long-duration space operations," Sarah explained. "We evolved for endurance rather than specialized environmental adaptation. With proper life support systems, human crews could maintain effectiveness for months without resupply." The questions continued for hours, covering everything from human psychology under stress to the logistics of maintaining chemical-powered vessels in deep space. Sarah answered as thoroughly as possible, recognizing that these aliens were no longer seeing humans as curiosities, but as potential partners in addressing a serious threat. As the session finally wound down, General approached the human delegation area. His serpentine form moved with the careful grace of a predator showing respect to another apex hunter. "Human," he said formally, "your species has proven more capable than our initial assessments indicated. I look forward to observing human tactical doctrine in operation." "Thank you, General," Sarah replied. "I think you'll find that human and galactic approaches to warfare complement each other well." Scales shifted to colors indicating thoughtful consideration. "Perhaps, or perhaps we will discover that we have much to learn from species we have underestimated." As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Sarah packed her rifle case and prepared to return to the transport that would take them back to Earth. In 48 hours, she would brief the United Earth Defense Force command structure on the most significant military alliance in human history. "Think it will work?" Martinez asked as they walked through the crystalline corridors of the council complex. Sarah shouldered her rifle case and looked out through the transparent walls at the alien cityscape beyond. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, unknown vessels were conducting reconnaissance missions that could herald invasion. The fate of human civilization, and possibly galactic civilization, might depend on whether primitive kinetic weapons and obsolete tactics could solve problems that the most advanced technology in the galaxy could not. "It has to work," she said simply. The transport lifted off into the alien sky, carrying news that would transform Earth's relationship with the galaxy and commit humanity to its first interstellar war. Sarah watched the council complex shrink. The briefing room at United Earth Defense Force headquarters had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Admiral sat at the head of the polished metal conference table, still adjusting to the fact that she now shared a surname with Earth's most famous sniper. The holographic displays surrounding the room showed star charts covering regions of space that humanity had never imagined reaching, while alien technology interfaces gleamed alongside familiar human equipment. "The intelligence package from the Galactic Council is comprehensive," reported Colonel Martinez, newly promoted following his successful diplomatic mission. "We have complete sensor logs from 17 separate incursions, plus tactical assessments from 4 different alien military organizations." Admiral studied the 3-dimensional display showing the void sectors, vast regions of space beyond the galactic rim where the mysterious vessels had been detected. The distances were staggering, requiring faster-than-light travel capabilities that humanity was only beginning to understand through their new galactic partnerships. "What's our assessment of the threat level?" she asked. Commander Sarah stood at the display controls, her rifle case resting against her chair even in this formal setting. Since her return from the Council demonstration, she had been promoted to head the newly formed Void Reconnaissance Division, a position that made her both a tactical advisor and a symbol of humanity's unexpected military relevance. The pattern is clearly reconnaissance in preparation for larger operations, Sarah replied, manipulating the holographic display to show vessel movements over time. The incursions are becoming more frequent and penetrating deeper into galactic territory. Each mission appears to be gathering specific intelligence about defense positions, trade routes, and inhabited systems. How do we know they're not just explorers? Asked General, the UEDF's chief of strategic planning. Because explorers would respond to communication attempts, Sarah explained. These vessels actively avoid contact while conducting systematic surveillance of military and industrial targets. That's not exploration, it's preparation for invasion. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth had just achieved full membership in the Galactic Council, gaining access to technologies and alliances beyond their wildest dreams. Now they were being asked to help defend galactic civilization against an unknown enemy that had specifically adapted to counter the aliens' technological advantages. What resources are we committing to this joint task force? Admiral inquired. Colonel Martinez consulted his datapad. Initial deployment will include 12 modified patrol vessels, each carrying a crew of 8 human personnel plus alien liaison officers. The Galactic Council is providing FTL drive systems, enhanced life support, and long-range communication equipment. What about weapon systems? That's where things get interesting, Sarah said, activating another section of the display. The aliens want us to maintain our kinetic weapons technology while integrating their sensor and navigation systems. They believe our primitive, projectile weapons will be more effective against stealth vessels than their energy-based armaments. General leaned forward, studying the technical specifications. Are we talking about scaled-up versions of small arms or something entirely different? Both, Sarah replied. Each patrol vessel will carry magnetic acceleration cannons that fire tungsten projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. For close engagement, we'll have upgraded versions of standard kinetic weapons adapted for zero-atmosphere combat. And if these unknown vessels have shields? Intelligence analysis suggests they can't maintain energy barriers while operating in stealth mode, Colonel Martinez explained. The power requirements would make them visible to galactic sensors across multiple star systems. Admiral nodded slowly, processing the tactical implications. So we're betting that these intruders have prioritized stealth over protection. It's a reasonable assessment based on their observed behavior, Sarah confirmed. Every time galactic forces have attempted to intercept them, the vessels have disappeared rather than engaging. That suggests they're either lightly armed or under strict orders to avoid detection at all costs. Or both, General added grimly. The discussion continued for several hours, covering everything from crew selection criteria to rules of engagement for first contact with unknown alien technology. The task force would be operating in regions of space where the nearest backup might be weeks away at FTL speeds, making autonomous decision-making capabilities crucial for mission success. Personnel selection will be critical, Admiral emphasized. These crews will be representing humanity in our first major galactic military operation. They need to be technically competent, culturally adaptable, and psychologically prepared for extended isolation. The Sniper Corps has volunteered to provide marksmen for each vessel, Sarah reported. Advanced training in zero-gravity combat has already begun at the Luna facility. What about the alien liaison officers? Colonel Martinez asked. How well do we understand their capabilities and limitations? Each vessel will carry representatives from 3 different galactic powers, Admiral replied, consulting the diplomatic agreements. A hegemony tactical specialist, a Dominion technical officer, and a Confederation strategic advisor. They'll provide expertise in galactic military doctrine while learning human operational procedures. Sarah activated a new section of the holographic display showing training facility schematics. Integration exercises have been surprisingly successful. The aliens are adapting to human tactical thinking faster than we anticipated, and they're providing valuable insights into the technical capabilities we're likely to encounter. Such as stealth technology that can bend sensor readings, propulsion systems that don't emit detectable energy signatures, and hull materials that can phase between dimensions, Sarah explained. We're dealing with technology that's significantly more advanced than standard galactic military equipment. The revelation was sobering. If the unknown vessels possessed technology superior to the galactic community's most advanced systems, then even human tactical advantages might not be sufficient to ensure mission success. "What's our fallback strategy if kinetic weapons prove ineffective?" General inquired. "Intelligence gathering and evasion," Sarah replied without hesitation. "If we can't engage these vessels directly, then our mission becomes observation and documentation. The galactic community needs to understand what they're facing before they can develop effective countermeasures." Admiral studied the mission parameters displayed around the room, thinking about the 12,000 personnel who would be depending on decisions made in this briefing room. "When do we deploy?" "First wave launches in 6 weeks," Colonel Martinez reported. "The Council is providing accelerated training in alien technology operation, while our crews are teaching galactic personnel human tactical doctrine." "And the political implications if this goes wrong?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Earth's membership in the Galactic Council was contingent on the success of this military cooperation agreement. Failure could result in humanity being relegated to protected status, a galactic nature preserved with no voice in interstellar affairs. "Then we don't let it go wrong," Sarah said simply. 3 weeks later, the UEDF Luna training facility buzzed with activity unlike anything in its history. Human personnel worked alongside alien instructors in scenarios that would have been pure science fiction just months earlier. In one section of the complex, Sniper Corps trainees practiced zero-gravity marksmanship using magnetic acceleration rifles, while nearby chambers hosted cultural sensitivity sessions where human officers learned to interpret the emotional states of crystalline Dominion advisors. Sarah moved through the training areas with the confidence of someone who had become the unofficial bridge between human and galactic military cultures. Her demonstration at the Council range had made her a celebrity among both communities, but more importantly, it had established her credibility as someone who could translate tactical concepts across species barriers. "The targeting solutions for moving vessels in three-dimensional space require different calculations than terrestrial sniping," she explained to a group of advanced marksmen. "But the fundamental principles remain the same: predict movement, compensate for external factors, and deliver precisely aimed fire when the target enters the optimal engagement zone." Sergeant Williams, a veteran sniper with 15 years of experience, raised his hand. "Ma'am, what about the psychological factors? Shooting at alien vessels versus known human targets?" "That's actually less of a problem than you might expect," Sarah replied. "The unknown vessels register as mechanical targets rather than living beings. Your training in engaging automated systems and drone targets applies directly." "What about rules of engagement?" asked Corporal Jackson. "Do we shoot first and ask questions later or attempt communication?" "Standard first contact protocols apply," Sarah explained, activating a holographic display showing engagement decision trees. "Attempt communication, document non-responsive behavior, and engage only if the target demonstrates hostile intent or attempts to flee after direct contact." The rules sounded straightforward in the sterile environment of the training facility, but Sarah knew that real-world situations would be far more complex. The crews would be operating in the vast emptiness between galaxies, where the nearest backup might be days or weeks away, and where split-second decisions could have consequences affecting the entire galactic community. In another section of the facility, human engineers worked with hegemony technicians to integrate alien FTL communication systems into human vessel designs. The technology was sophisticated beyond anything Earth had developed, but it operated on principles that human technical personnel could understand and maintain. "The quantum entanglement communicators allow instantaneous communication across galactic distances," explained Chief Engineer, studying schematics that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "But they're vulnerable to dimensional interference and can be disrupted by exotic matter fields." "Which means," asked Lieutenant Commander, who would be serving as Chief Technical Officer on one of the patrol vessels. "Which means we need backup communication systems using conventional electromagnetic transmission," replied. "If the primary systems fail, we fall back on radio communications and light-speed data transfer. That could take years to reach inhabited systems from the void sectors." Better than no communication at all, pointed out. Besides, the patrol routes are designed to bring vessels within range of galactic communication networks every few weeks. The technical challenges were immense, but they paled in comparison to the cultural adaptation required for successful human-alien cooperation. In yet another section of the facility, Commander Brooks worked with Confederation strategic advisor Al to develop operational procedures that could accommodate the tactical preferences of both species. Human doctrine emphasizes individual initiative and adaptive response to changing conditions, Brooks explained, his words translated into the complex harmonic patterns that served as Al's native language. This conflicts with standard Confederation protocols that prioritize coordinated group action and adherence to predetermined strategic plans. Al's reply came through the translation matrix as a series of precisely modulated tones. Confederation experience suggests that autonomous decision-making in combat situations leads to tactical fragmentation and reduced overall effectiveness. But human experience suggests that rigid adherence to plans leads to tactical inflexibility and inability to respond to unexpected threats, Brooks countered. The debate was fundamental, representing different philosophical approaches to military organization that had evolved over thousands of years on different worlds. Finding common ground would require compromise from both sides and the development of entirely new operational doctrines. Perhaps, suggested the translation matrix in response to Al's complex harmonic sequence, hybrid approaches could combine human adaptability with Confederation coordination protocols. Brooks nodded thoughtfully. Autonomous tactical response within predetermined strategic parameters. Human crews make real-time combat decisions while maintaining adherence to overall mission objectives. This approach has theoretical merit, Al agreed, but it requires extensive training to ensure compatible interpretation of strategic priorities. The conversation continued for hours, slowly building the framework for cooperation between military cultures that had developed in isolation from each other. Similar discussions were taking place throughout the facility as personnel from different worlds learned to work together toward common objectives. 2 weeks before deployment, Sarah conducted final qualification exercises for the sniper teams that would be responsible for precision engagement of unknown vessels. The test scenario involved targets moving at significant fractions of light speed through three-dimensional space while employing stealth technology that made conventional tracking extremely difficult. Target acquisition in zero gravity with magnetic acceleration weapons requires different muscle memory than chemical propulsion systems, she explained to the assembled marksmen. The recoil characteristics, projectile velocity, and ballistic computation are all fundamentally different. The qualification course stretched through multiple sections of the Luna facility's zero-gravity training areas. Targets appeared and disappeared using holographic projection systems that simulated the stealth capabilities observed in the unknown vessels. Each sniper had 3 attempts to achieve qualifying scores, 4 successful engagements out of 6 target presentations. Sergeant Williams moved through the course with the fluid grace of someone completely adapted to zero-gravity combat. His magnetic acceleration rifle tracked smoothly across the range, following targets that phased in and out of visibility according to the observed patterns of the unknown vessels. When he fired, the projectile moved faster than human eyes could follow, its impact registered only by the target's destruction feedback. Target eliminated, announced the course computer. Impact velocity 0.37 light speed, accuracy center mass, time to engagement 2.1 seconds. 4 more targets appeared in sequence, each presenting different challenges in terms of movement pattern, stealth characteristics, and engagement range. Williams eliminated all of them with the mechanical precision that marked a master sniper, his final score placing him in the top tier of qualified personnel. "Excellent work," Sarah commented as Williams returned to the starting position. "You're adapting to the new weapons systems faster than most of our veteran marksmen." "The targeting principles are the same," Williams replied, checking his rifle's status indicators. "Lead the target, compensate for external factors, and put the projectile where it needs to be when it needs to be there." "What about the psychological aspects? Shooting at vessels that might contain unknown alien life forms?" Williams was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Ma'am, the way I see it, these unknown vessels are conducting reconnaissance for possible invasion of inhabited worlds. Whether they contain aliens, robots, or something else entirely, they represent a threat to billions of sentient beings. My job is to eliminate threats. Sarah nodded approvingly. The psychological profiles indicated that veteran snipers adapted more easily to the moral complexities of engaging unknown targets than less experienced personnel. Their training had already prepared them for situations where split-second decisions about life and death had to be made based on incomplete information. As the final week of training began, the 12 patrol vessels assigned to the Joint Task Force underwent final systems integration at the orbital shipyards above Earth. Each vessel represented a fusion of human and galactic technology that would have been impossible just months earlier. The basic hull design was human, optimized for long-duration missions and chemical life support systems. The propulsion, navigation, and communication systems were galactic, providing capabilities that extended human reach across interstellar distances. Admiral toured the lead vessel, designated UES Vigilant, accompanied by captain who would command the ship during its deployment to the void sectors. The integration of human and alien technology was seamless, creating vessels that combine the best features of both technological approaches. FTL drive performance exceeds specifications, reported, consulting data displays that showed test results from the previous week. We can maintain faster-than-light speeds for up to 6 weeks before requiring maintenance, which gives us operational range covering most of the target area. What about crew endurance? Admiral asked. Better than expected. The alien life support systems are more efficient than our baseline technology, and the extended crew quarters provide adequate space for psychological health during long deployments. They moved through the vessel's corridors, noting the careful integration of human ergonomics with alien functionality. The bridge featured stations designed for both human crew members and their galactic counterparts, with translation systems that allowed real-time communication during tactical operations. Weapon systems? Admiral inquired as they entered the armory section. Magnetic acceleration cannons are installed and calibrated, replied, patting the housing of a weapon system that could accelerate tungsten projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. For close engagement, we have adapted plasma rifles and conventional kinetic weapons for zero-atmosphere operation. Any concerns about crew readiness? Consider the question carefully before answering. The personnel are technically proficient and psychologically prepared. The alien liaison officers have integrated well with human operational procedures, but this will be their first real test under combat conditions. Admiral nodded. Every military operation involved unknowns, but this mission would be testing cooperation between species that had evolved on different worlds under completely different conditions. Success would require not just technical competence but cultural adaptation under the stress of potential combat. Rules of engagement are clear. Crystal clear, confirmed. Observe, document, attempt communication, and engage only if threatened or if vessels attempt to flee after direct contact. The mission priority is intelligence gathering rather than destruction of unknown vessels. And if these vessels prove to be hostile, then we defend ourselves and report back to Galactic Command with everything we've learned about their capabilities and intentions. The final briefing for all 12 vessel commanders took place in the same room where humanity's participation in galactic affairs had been decided weeks earlier. Sarah stood before the assembled officers, her rifle case beside her chair as always, ready to provide tactical guidance for the mission that would determine humanity's future in the galactic community. Remember that this is ultimately a reconnaissance mission, she emphasized, studying the faces of officers who would be commanding Earth's first interstellar military operation. Our primary objective is to gather intelligence about these unknown vessels and their intentions. Combat engagement is authorized only under specific circumstances outlined in your operational orders. What if we encounter technology that's beyond our ability to handle? Asked Captain of the UES Hunter. Then you document everything you can and withdraw to report your findings, Sarah replied. The galactic community needs to understand what they're facing, even if individual encounters prove unsuccessful. And if withdrawal isn't possible? Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking about the vast distances and unknown dangers that these officers would face in the darkness between galaxies. Then, you do your duty and ensure that your final transmission contains enough information to warn others about what you've discovered. The room fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled commanders. They would be operating further from Earth than any human had ever traveled, facing unknown technology under conditions that made rescue or reinforcement impossible. "Any final questions?" Sarah asked. Captain raised her hand. "Ma'am, what are our chances of actually encountering these unknown vessels during the patrol missions?" "Based on the frequency of recent incursions and the patrol routes designed by galactic intelligence, approximately 60% chance of contact within the first deployment cycle," Sarah replied. "The unknown vessels seem to be following specific patterns that our routes are designed to intercept. And our chances of successful engagement if contact occurs." Sarah looked around the room at the officers who would be representing humanity in its first major test as a galactic military partner. "That depends on how well you've absorbed your training and how effectively you can cooperate with your alien counterparts under combat stress. But I have confidence in your abilities." As the briefing concluded and the officers filed out to make final preparations for deployment, Sarah remained in the room, studying the star charts that showed their patrol routes extending into the darkness beyond the galactic rim. Tomorrow, 12 human vessels would depart for regions of space where unknown forces were conducting reconnaissance for purposes that remained unclear. The UES Vigilant drifted silently through the void sectors, its hull dark against the scattered light of distant galaxies. Captain stood on the bridge, watching sensor displays that showed nothing but empty space stretching for thousands of light years in every direction. They had been on patrol for 3 weeks, following routes designed by galactic intelligence to intercept the mysterious vessels that had been probing the edges of civilized space. "Anything on passive sensors?" she asked quietly, her voice barely disturbing the bridge's tense atmosphere. "Negative on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant, no relation to the famous sniper despite sharing her surname. "No electromagnetic signatures, no gravitational anomalies, no detectable energy sources within our scanning range." The bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency that had become their standard during the long patrol. Human personnel operated alongside their galactic counterparts, creating a seamless integration of different technological approaches and tactical philosophies. The Hegemony Tactical Specialist, a being named or monitored displays showing energy patterns that human sensors couldn't detect, while the Dominion Technical Officer maintained the FTL communication systems that kept them connected to Galactic Command. "The silence is concerning," commented Strategic Advisor Han of the Confederation, her harmonic voice translated by the bridge's communication systems. "Previous incursions in this sector showed regular activity every 4 to 6 days." Nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed their position relative to known incursion sites. "Either they've changed their patrol patterns, or they've detected our presence and altered their operational schedule. Or they're preparing for something bigger," added Sergeant Williams from his position at the weapons control station. His magnetic acceleration rifle rested in its mount beside him, ready for immediate deployment if close-range combat became necessary. The possibility had occurred to all of them during the long weeks of patrol. The unknown vessel's reconnaissance activities had been increasing in frequency and boldness, suggesting systematic preparation for larger operations. If they had suddenly ceased their activities in this sector, it might indicate that their intelligence-gathering phase was complete. "Contact on long-range optical sensors," Lieutenant announced suddenly, her voice cutting through the bridge's quiet tension. "Bearing 27 Markate, range approximately 50,000 kilometers." Moved to the sensor station, studying the enhanced image that appeared on the main display. The object was barely visible even with maximum magnification, a dark shape that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the faint light of distant stars. Its configuration was unlike anything in galactic databases, with flowing curves that suggested organic growth rather than mechanical construction. "Tactical assessment?" asked. Or's compound eyes focused on the sensor readings while his mandibles worked in patterns indicating concentration. "The vessel appears to be maintaining minimal energy output," he reported through the translation matrix. No active sensors detected, no propulsion signatures, no defensive barrier emissions. Size estimate: approximately 400 meters in length, but the exact configuration is difficult to determine, Lieutenant replied. The hull material seems to bend sensor readings, creating distortion patterns that make precise measurement impossible. Studied the unknown vessel, thinking about the operational parameters that had been drilled into every patrol crew. Attempt communication, document behavior, engage only if threatened. The vessel showed no signs of hostility, but its mere presence in this sector represented a potential threat to galactic security. Open communication channels, she ordered. All standard frequencies, maximum broadcast power. Channels open, reported the communications officer. Cleared her throat and spoke into the pickup with the formal precision required for first contact situations. Unknown vessel, this is Captain of the United Earth Defense Force Vessel Vigilant, operating under Joint Galactic Authority. Please respond and identify yourself. The transmission repeated automatically across multiple frequency bands and language matrices designed to accommodate every known form of communication in the galaxy. They waited, watching for any response from the mysterious vessel that continued its slow drift through the darkness. No response detected, the communications officer reported after several minutes. The vessel shows no indication of receiving or acknowledging our transmission. Could they be unable to receive our signals? Asked. Hand's harmonic response translated as thoughtful consideration. Possible, but unlikely. The level of technology required for stealth capabilities of this magnitude would almost certainly include sophisticated communication systems. Then they're choosing not to respond, concluded. Maintain communication attempts but prepare for tactical movement. If they're conducting unauthorized reconnaissance in galactic territory, we need to document their capabilities and intentions. The Vigilant began a slow approach toward the unknown vessel, using minimal power to avoid detection while maintaining readiness for immediate combat response. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each member knowing their role in the carefully rehearsed procedures for unknown contact situations. Range 30,000 kilometers, Lieutenant reported. The vessel is beginning to show more detailed structure on enhanced optical sensors. The image on the main display sharpened, revealing a ship design that conventional understanding of space vessel construction. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, with surfaces that shifted between dimensions in ways that hurt to watch directly. There were no visible weapons ports, engine exhaust, or sensor arrays, just the organic curves of something that might have grown rather than been built. Any reaction to our approach? Asked. Negative, reported Sergeant Williams from the weapons station. The vessel maintains course and speed with no indication of awareness of our presence. That's tactically impossible, Orr observed, his translation indicating confusion. Any vessel advanced enough for this level of stealth capability would possess sensors capable of detecting our approach from this range. Felt a chill of apprehension. Either the unknown vessel was genuinely unaware of their presence, which seemed impossible given its obvious technological sophistication, or it was deliberately allowing them to approach. Neither possibility was encouraging. Range 20,000 kilometers, Lieutenant announced. I'm detecting some unusual readings on electromagnetic sensors. Define unusual. The vessel appears to be generating a field that distorts local space-time, explained, her voice carrying the careful precision of someone reporting something that shouldn't be possible. Gravitational readings are inconsistent with the vessel's apparent mass, and there are quantum fluctuations that suggest dimensional manipulation. Could it be preparing to jump to FTL? Asked. Unknown, replied. The energy patterns don't match any known FTL drive system in galactic databases. Strategic Advisor Hand's harmonic voice carried urgent overtones as it translated. Confederation experience suggests that dimensional manipulation technology is extremely dangerous. Vessels should maintain safe distance from unknown space-time distortions. Weighed the advice against the mission parameters. Their orders emphasized intelligence gathering over crew safety, and this was the closest any galactic force had come to one of the mysterious vessels. The opportunity to document unknown technology might not come again. Maintain approach but reduce speed, she ordered. Maximum sensor recording on all frequencies. If this vessel possesses dimensional manipulation technology, we need to document everything we can about its capabilities. Range 15,000 kilometers, reported. The space-time distortions are becoming more pronounced. On the main display, the unknown vessel seemed to shimmer and pulse, its outline becoming indistinct as reality bent around its hull. The effect was mesmerizing and disturbing, like watching something exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The vessel is beginning to accelerate, Williams announced from the weapons station. No detectable propulsion signature, but velocity is increasing rapidly. Pursuit course asked. Negative, the vessel is moving directly toward the galactic rim, away from inhabited systems. Felt a moment of relief mixed with disappointment. The unknown vessel was withdrawing rather than engaging, which reduced the immediate threat, but also eliminated the opportunity for detailed study of its technology and intentions. Maintain tracking as long as possible, she ordered. Document everything, acceleration rates, energy signatures, any data that might help galactic intelligence understand what we're dealing with. Range 20,000 kilometers and increasing, reported. Acceleration continuing to increase with no apparent upper limit. On the display, the unknown vessel was becoming a distant speck of distorted light, moving away from their position at velocities that exceeded anything in galactic databases. Within minutes. 6 shots had proven human capability. Now they would discover whether that capability was sufficient to help defend galactic civilization against whatever was moving in the darkness between galaxies. Them, thinking about the responsibilities that came with the opportunities they had been offered. 6 shots had changed everything. Now they would discover what humans could accomplish when the galaxy was depending on them.